Have you ever wondered what Earth was really like during the Ice Age? A time when towering glaciers covered continents, giant beasts roamed the frozen lands, and human survival was a daily miracle. In this video, we'll take a deep and calming journey through the frozen past of our planet. If you enjoy relaxing explorations of history and science, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Imagine waking up to a world locked in frost. The air is crisp, biting at your skin even under thick layers of fur and hide. All around you, the landscape stretches in brilliant shades of white and blue, snow-covered plains, frozen rivers, and massive walls of ice rising like mountains in the distance. This was Earth during the Ice Age, an era of staggering cold, incredible resilience, and slow, relentless transformation. The Ice Age, also known as the Pleistocene epoch, began around 2.6 million years ago and lasted until approximately 11,700 years ago. Though we often refer to it as a single event, it wasn't just one continuous deep freeze. Instead, it was a cycle of glacial and interglacial periods, times when immense ice sheets would grow, covering huge portions of the continents, and then retreat as the planet warmed slightly, only to advance again over thousands of years. In the depths of the Ice Age, massive glaciers stretched from the poles toward the equator. North America, Northern Europe, and large parts of Asia were buried beneath layers of ice that reached miles in thickness. The sheer weight of these glaciers reshaped entire continents, grinding down mountains, carving out valleys, and creating vast basins that would later become lakes. But what caused the Ice Age in the first place? The answer lies in a delicate balance of cosmic forces and earthly rhythms. The planet's orbit around the sun changes slightly over tens of thousands of years, as does the tilt of its axis and its wobble in space, phenomena known as Milankovitch cycles. These small variations alter the amount of sunlight different parts of the Earth receive, and over long periods they can trigger significant climate changes. When these changes align just right, temperatures drop and glaciers begin to form. Volcanic activity and shifts in atmospheric greenhouse gases also played a role. Lower levels of carbon dioxide and methane in the atmosphere allowed more heat to escape into space, cooling the planet further and allowing the ice sheets to expand. Life during the Ice Age was extraordinarily tough, but nature adapted in remarkable ways. Animals evolved thick fur, large bodies to retain heat, and even specialized behaviors to survive the intense cold. Woolly mammoths, saber-toothed cats, giant sloths, and the mighty short-faced bear roamed the landscape. Each was a marvel of evolutionary engineering, perfectly suited to its frozen world. Early humans, too, endured the challenges of this unforgiving time. Our ancestors learned to make fire, craft tools, build shelters, and develop complex social bonds to ensure their survival. They followed herds of animals across icy tundras, migrated in search of warmer climates, and began to form the first threads of culture and art. Cave paintings, carved figures, and burial rituals show us that even in the coldest chapters of Earth's story, the human spirit burned brightly. And yet, the Ice Age was not a static world. It was a dynamic, ever-shifting theatre of climate, geology, and biology. Ice would advance and retreat. Ecosystems would rise and fall, and the course of rivers would shift as glaciers bulldozed the land. Over thousands of years, the earth was sculpted by cold and wind, snow and time. In this video, we will walk through this incredible epoch in 10 parts, each revealing a new layer of the Ice Age. We will explore the world before the ice, the birth of glaciers, the lives of creatures both mighty and small, the journey of humanity, and how the Ice Age finally came to an end. To understand the Ice Age, we must first step back in time to the world that came before it. Picture a warmer earth, one without the crushing silence of ice or the howling winds of endless winters. This was the late Pliocene, the geological epoch just before the Pleistocene began. The continents were nearly in their present positions, and many of the animals we know today, elephants, big cats, deer, already roamed the land. Forests and grasslands stretched across much of the globe. The polar regions still held ice, but the world overall was warmer, greener, and wetter. Life thrived in diverse ecosystems, but even in this seemingly stable world, there were signs that change was coming. Slowly, over thousands of years, global temperatures began to decline. Atmospheric carbon dioxide dropped. Ocean currents subtly shifted. The Earth's orbital path and axial tilt aligned in just the right way to begin a slow, steady cooling. Glaciers began to creep across the northern latitudes. In the beginning, it might have seemed like just another cold spell, but the cold stayed. Snow fell, and then more snow. Year after year, the snow didn't fully melt. It compacted under its own weight, transforming into ice. Over centuries, that ice
thicker and heavier, pushing down the land beneath it. By the time the Ice Age was fully underway, an entirely new Earth had emerged. Glaciers, some over 2 miles thick, spread like frozen tsunamis, carving their way across continents. The sheer mass of ice was enough to depress the land beneath it, in places like present-day Canada
and Northern Europe. The weight of the ice physically pushed the crust of the Earth downward, altering coastlines and creating depressions that would one day become lakes. Meanwhile, sea levels dropped as vast quantities of water were locked up in the glaciers. Entire land bridges emerged between continents, most famously the Bering Land Bridge that once connected Siberia to Alaska. This natural highway allowed animals and humans to migrate between Asia and North America, shaping the evolutionary story of both continents. Even regions far from the glaciers were affected. Winds grew stronger, weather patterns changed, and deserts expanded in some areas due to the drop in global moisture. Vegetation shifted. Where once there had been thick forest, now stood open tundra or cold grassland. It was a time of great movement, both of land and of life. Species migrated vast distances in search of food and shelter. Some animals, like mastodons and ground sloths, found niches in the emerging environments and flourished. Others perished, unable to adapt to the changing climate. These extinctions were often slow, the result of 1,000 small pressures: less food, colder winters, increased predation. As the earth transformed, so too did its atmosphere. Dust and ash from volcanic eruptions, many of which were triggered by the shifting weight of the glaciers, filled the skies at times, further cooling the planet. The feedback loop of ice and cold deepened, but amidst the bleakness, beauty also bloomed. In isolated valleys, protected from the worst of the cold, ancient flora persisted. In oceans pushed back from frozen coastlines, new ecosystems developed. And in the minds of early humans, fire, shelter, and language became more essential and more powerful than ever before. Archaeological evidence shows that even in this harsh world, early humans were not merely surviving, they were innovating. They crafted tools of bone and stone. They created art, leaving behind handprints and animal figures in dark caves that still echo with their presence. They buried their dead with care, suggesting that their thoughts extended beyond mere survival into the realms of meaning, spirit, and memory. They were becoming something more than just animals adapting to a changing world. They were becoming human in the fullest sense of the word. As the Ice Age deepened, it brought with it the most iconic landscapes of frozen time. Mammoth steppes, glacial valleys, icy fjords and endless snowy plains. It was a new earth, a colder, quieter, more introspective earth. And this was just the beginning. As the cold took hold of Earth, the stage was set for the rise of the Megafauna, the massive beasts that would become icons of the Ice Age. These creatures were giants, not only in size, but in their symbolic presence. They captured the imagination of our ancestors, appeared in ancient cave art, and now stand as emblems of a world long gone. But why were so many Ice Age animals so large? The answer lies in a concept known as Bergmann's rule, which suggests that animal species in colder environments tend to evolve larger bodies. Bigger bodies conserve heat better, as they have a lower surface area to volume ratio. During the Ice Age, this adaptation was key to survival. Take the woolly mammoth, for example. Towering nearly 13 feet tall at the shoulder and weighing up to 6 tons, it was a relative of today's elephants, but far better suited to the cold. Its dense woolly coat, thick layer of subcutaneous fat, small ears to minimize heat loss, and long curved tusks made it perfectly adapted to the harsh conditions of the tundra. Then there were the saber-toothed cats, particularly the fearsome Smilodon. Though shorter and stockier than modern big cats, it was immensely powerful. Its most iconic feature, of course, was its 2 elongated canine teeth, ideal for piercing through thick hides and delivering deadly bites to prey like bison or juvenile mammoths. Roaming alongside them was the giant ground sloth, a towering herbivore that could reach heights of up to 20 feet when standing on its hind legs. Despite its slow movement, it was a formidable forager, capable of pulling down branches with massive clawed arms to feed on leaves and bark. The Ice Age was also home to the American mastodon, a relative of the mammoth, but with straighter tusks and different teeth adapted for chewing coarse vegetation. Mastodons preferred wooded areas where they browsed among the sparse forests that dotted the glacial edges. Another fascinating creature was the short-faced bear, one of the largest mammalian land predators to ever walk North America. It stood over 12 feet tall on its hind legs and could run at impressive speeds, making it a dominant carnivore in its environment. And then there were the smaller giants, the massive beavers, nearly the size of black bears, and the majestic Irish elk, known for its enormous antlers that could span over 12 feet. These animals thrived in a world shaped by cold and ice. Their ecosystems were vast grasslands and tundras known as Mammoth steppes, stretching across Eurasia and North America. These regions, though cold, supported a rich array of grasses and sedges that could sustain large herbivores, which in turn supported predators and scavengers. But it wasn't just about survival. These animals played crucial roles in shaping their environments. Large herbivores helped maintain open landscapes by trampling small shrubs and spreading seeds. Predators kept populations in balance. Their very presence was a form of ecological engineering, helping to sustain the rhythm of life during an otherwise bleak and forbidding time. However, their size was both a blessing and a curse. As the climate shifted and human populations grew more skilled in hunting, these megafauna faced increasing pressure. But in this chapter of our story, they still roam, thunder, and roar across the icy plains. Their footprints press deep into the frozen soil of prehistory. And they were not alone. Humans too were evolving, becoming more strategic, more cooperative, and more culturally rich. Their paths would soon intersect with the giants of ice and fur in ways that would forever alter the fate of both. Imagine a force so vast and relentless that it can grind mountains into dust, carve valleys out of solid rock, and shape entire continents over the span of millennia. This is the glacier, a river of ice that moves with the slow certainty of time itself. During the Ice Age, glaciers were not static blocks of frozen water. They were dynamic, living forces, advancing, retreating, and sculpting the earth with every breath. Covering nearly a third of the planet's land surface at their peak, these colossal ice sheets defined the very geography of our world. The largest of these was the Laurentide ice sheet, which blanketed much of North America. In some areas, it stretched more than 2 miles thick. To the east, the Fennoscandian ice sheet covered northern Europe, while the Patagonian ice sheet dominated the southern tip of South America. As glaciers formed, they grew from layers of compacted snow. Each winter, snowfall added to the mass. Each summer, less melted than had fallen. Over centuries, the accumulated snow compressed into dense glacial ice, a crystalline mass that flowed outward under its own weight. And yes, glaciers flow slowly, but with tremendous power. This movement isn't like water rushing down a river. It's more like thick honey spreading under pressure. The base of a glacier grinds against rock, sometimes melting slightly from the pressure and creating a slick layer that aids its slow advance. As the glacier moves, it pulls rocks, boulders, and debris with it, an icy bulldozer reshaping the land beneath. Glaciers carved out the Great Lakes, gouged the fjords of Norway and Alaska, and created countless U-shaped valleys, drumlins, and moraines. Landforms still visible today as the fingerprints of a frozen age. One of the most remarkable effects of the glaciers was their ability to depress the Earth's crust. The immense weight of the ice pushed the lithosphere down, sinking land by hundreds of meters. And when the glaciers melted, that land slowly began to rebound, a process called isostatic rebound that continues even today. in places like Canada and Scandinavia. But the glaciers didn't just sculpt the land, they also influenced the sky and sea. By locking up vast amounts of water, sea levels dropped by over 100 meters, coastlines expanded, and submerged regions became exposed. Areas like the English Channel, the Bering Land Bridge, and parts of Indonesia were dry land, connecting continents and allowing animals and early humans to migrate in ways impossible today. The reflective surfaces of the glaciers, white, vast, and gleaming, also bounce sunlight back into space. This helped cool the planet further, reinforcing the cycle of ice and cold. In this way, glaciers didn't just respond to climate, they helped control it. But glaciers were also indicators of change. When the planet warmed slightly due to natural orbital shifts or atmospheric changes, the glaciers would retreat, leaving behind scars, strata of rock, pools of meltwater, and new river systems. These retreats were not gentle. They were cataclysmic at times, unleashing glacial outburst floods that reshaped entire landscapes in a matter of days. One of the most dramatic examples was the Missoula floods in North America. As glaciers retreated, they occasionally dammed massive lakes with ice. When those ice dams broke, torrents of water, carrying debris and rocks the size of houses, rushed across the land, carving canyons and sweeping away everything in their path. To live near a glacier was to live in the presence of a godlike force, silent, slow, and sublime. To early humans and animals alike, glaciers were both boundary and beacon. They shaped migratory paths, dictated seasons, and controlled the rise and fall of ecosystems. They were the architecture of the Ice Age world, a moving, breathing expression of Earth's deepest rhythms. And though many of them have vanished, their legacy remains etched in stone and memory. As the glaciers expanded and retreated, they created not just valleys and rivers, but entire cycles of life. In their shadow, ecosystems flourished. In their wake, new lands emerged. And at their edges, life adapted in ingenious ways. In the shadow of the glaciers, stretching like a vast frozen sea across Eurasia and North America, was a unique and breathtaking biome known as the Mammoth Steppe. This was not a world of endless white as one might imagine, but a complex wind-swept landscape of grasses, shrubs, and hardy life, teeming with some of the most fascinating creatures to have ever lived. The Mammoth Steppe was, in many ways, the largest biome on Earth during the Ice Age. It stretched from the edges of Western Europe all the way across Siberia, over the Bering Land Bridge, and into the northern reaches of Canada and Alaska. It was a corridor of survival, connecting continents with a continuity of climate, flora, and fauna. This land was cold, yes, but not buried in deep snow like the glaciated regions to the north. It's dry, frigid. Winds kept heavy snow cover from accumulating, allowing grasses and low-growing herbs to thrive. Beneath the frozen soil was permafrost, but above it, during the brief summers, wildflowers bloomed and the land became a flurry of activity. This was the domain of the woolly mammoth, the namesake of the biome. Their herds, sometimes hundreds strong, moved like slow, patient ships through the sea of grass. With their massive tusks, they cleared snow to reach the vegetation beneath, and their migrations carved out ancient trails still traceable in some places today. But mammoths were just one part of this intricate tapestry of life. Beside them wandered bison, musk oxen, and the wild horse, whose shaggy coats and compact bodies helped conserve heat. Grazers formed the base of the food web, and where there were grazers, there were predators, dire wolves, larger and more robust than today's grey wolves, hunted in tight-knit packs. Cave lions, slightly larger than modern lions and likely lacking manes, stalked the open plains with practiced stealth. The air carried the sounds of birds that thrived in this wide-open country. Ptarmigans, ravens, and migratory species that followed the seasonal rhythms. In the rivers and lakes carved by glacial melt, fish flourished, feeding both humans and animals alike. But perhaps the most visually arresting resident of this realm was the woolly rhinoceros. Stocky and covered in thick fur, with a massive curved horn, it was an Ice Age sentinel, built to endure cold and challenge predators with its formidable presence. Though solitary, it left deep impressions in the snowy earth, marking its slow passage across the steppe. What made the Mammoth Steppe so remarkable wasn't just its abundance, but its resilience. Despite the crushing cold, these ecosystems remained productive for tens of thousands of years. Unlike forests, which slowed in winter, or deserts, which dried under scorching suns, the steppe simply endured, frozen but functional, bitter but bountiful. And within this cold Eden, humans lived, adapted, and evolved. For early Homo sapiens and Neanderthals alike, the Mammoth Steppe was a source of everything: food, clothing, tools, and shelter. A single mammoth could provide meat for weeks, fat for fuel, seed for binding, bone for tools, and hide for clothing and tents. Mammoth tusks were even used to construct structures, circular huts covered in skins and insulated with snow. Their forms nestled into the earth to withstand the howling winds. These people followed the rhythms of the herds. They learned the migration patterns, the behaviors of prey, the timing of seasons. They became intimately attuned to the world around them. Their tools became more sophisticated: blades, scrapers, spears tipped with flint. Their art began to flourish. Caves. Across Europe, Places like Chauvet, Altamira, and Lascaux are adorned with images of mammoths, horses, reindeer, and lions. These were not just decorations. They were expressions of reverence, of memory, of storytelling in a time before words were written. Fire was central to life, not just for warmth, but for cooking, light, and community. Flames drew people together, offering a place to share stories, repair tools, and pass down knowledge. The hearth was the heart of Ice Age humanity. Between the ice sheets and the steppes were transition zones, mixed tundra and taiga, where forests began to take hold in brief interglacial periods. These zones allowed for different life to emerge: bears, elk, moose, and smaller creatures like Arctic hares and voles. Insects, too, were part of this hidden world. Their emergence in spring signaled the changing of the seasons and fed countless birds and small mammals. The cold demanded cooperation. Among animals and humans alike, survival often meant working together. Wolves evolved into companions, what we now call dogs, providing early warning against predators and assisting in hunts. This bond between human and animal began during the Ice Age and continues even now. Weather was harsh and unpredictable. Blizzards could last for days. Wind chills plunged well below freezing. But when the sun returned, even briefly, the land glittered in silver and gold. The air cleared, and the horizon stretched in unbroken lines. In that fleeting warmth, herds moved, birds called, and people emerged to hunt, to gather, and to live. This was not a world of silence or stillness. It was a world of slow, deliberate rhythm, of frost and fire, of life finding ways through scarcity and cold. The Mammoth Steppe was proof that even under the weight of ice, life endures. To live during the Ice Age was to wake each day in defiance of the elements. It was a time when survival was not guaranteed by strength alone, but by ingenuity, community, and adaptability. And it was in this crucible of cold and hardship that the human story became something deeper, something truly remarkable. By the middle of the Ice Age, several human species roamed the earth. Among them were Neanderthals in Europe and Western Asia, Denisovans in parts of Siberia and East Asia, and Homo sapiens, our own lineage, emerging and spreading out of Africa. The Ice Age was not just a backdrop to their existence. It was a force that shaped them, physically, mentally, and culturally. It influenced where they lived, how they hunted, what they wore, and how they understood their place in the world. Shelter was paramount. Natural caves offered protection from wind and snow, but in open environments, humans constructed ingenious dwellings. In Mammoth country, they built circular homes using bones and tusks, as frames covered in hides and packed with insulating materials. In forested areas, wood and stone became the primary materials. Some structures were semi-subterranean, dug partially into the ground to escape the cold. Clothing evolved beyond simple furs. People learned to tan hides, to sew using bone needles, and to layer garments for insulation. Some early societies even developed tailored clothing with hoods, mittens, and foot coverings. These innovations didn't just protect them, they allowed them to travel longer, hunt farther, and survive in increasingly bitter conditions. Hunting strategies became more complex. Humans studied their prey, tracked migration patterns, and learned to work together. They used coordinated ambushes, drove animals into natural traps, and set up pitfall systems. Spears and atlatls, spear throwers, extended their reach, and stone tools became increasingly refined, sharp, durable, and specialized. But perhaps the most powerful tool developed during the Ice Age was not made of stone or bone. It was culture. Human groups shared stories, myths, and knowledge. They passed down survival strategies, taught skills to younger generations, and formed tight social bonds. Burials became more ritualized, with offerings of tools, beads, and ochre, suggesting belief in an afterlife, or at least a reverence for the dead. In some sites, entire families were laid to rest together, their positions deliberate, their graves prepared with care. And then there was the art. In dark caves across Europe, early humans created something extraordinary. Murals of animals, handprints, abstract symbols, and geometric patterns. These weren't just random drawings, they were visual language, the first flickers of imagination recorded in stone. The animals depicted, bison, mammoths, horses, lions, were not just food sources. They were powerful symbols, woven into early spiritual or ceremonial life. Imagine them, a group gathered in a firelit cave, the flicker of flames bringing the painted walls to life, the sound of wind outside, the smell of smoke and earth within, someone telling a story, pointing to a painted mammoth, the past, present, and spirit world merging in that sacred space. Music, too, began to emerge. Archaeological discoveries include flutes carved from bird bones and mammoth ivory, with precise finger holes that allowed early people to produce melodies. These sounds, perhaps imitating birds, communicating over distance, or serving ceremonial purposes, echoed through the Ice Age night. But life was not without loss. The cold claimed many. So did hunger, illness, and injury. Childbirth was dangerous, and infections easily became fatal. Death was a constant companion, shaping the worldview of Ice Age humans. But their resilience was extraordinary. They endured, adapted, and grew stronger. And perhaps the most profound change during this time was the expansion of Homo sapiens into new and extreme environments. From Africa, they moved into the Middle East, then into Europe and Asia, adapting to new climates and encountering other human species. They met Neanderthals, sometimes competing, sometimes interbreeding. Their genes, Neanderthal and Denisovan, still live within us today, silent echoes of ancient encounters. By around 30,000 years ago, Homo sapiens were the dominant human species on Earth. Their flexibility, creativity, and social cohesion had carried them through the worst the Ice Age could offer. They made maps. They navigated coastlines. They created calendars based on the stars, tracked the movements of the moon, and may have understood the cycles of animals and seasons more intimately than we can imagine. And always they moved, following the animals, escaping the cold, seeking something better. Migration wasn't just a matter of choice, it was life. Across frozen tundras, over wind-swept steppes, and through forested river valleys, they carried not just food and tools, but ideas, language, memory, hope. So much of what we are today was forged in that time. Our bodies, our brains, our instincts to share, to protect, to create, they were sharpened in the cold. Beneath the weight of snow and the fear of hunger, humanity found its soul. This was the human Ice Age. Fierce, beautiful, and haunting. A time when every breath was a triumph, and every footstep on the frostbitten ground moved us closer to who we are now. The end of the Ice Age was not a sudden event. It was a slow, uneasy awakening. A long breath of warmth after an eternity of frost. For over 2 million years, the Earth had swung between cold and colder, with brief interludes of warmth. But something began to shift about 20,000 years ago. Subtle at first, then unstoppable. The great ice sheets, once seemingly eternal, began to retreat. Not all at once, not everywhere, but the process had begun. Temperatures in the northern hemisphere started to rise. The Earth's orbit and axial tilt, the same slow celestial rhythms that had helped trigger the Ice Age, were now favoring a warmer climate. As more sunlight reached the higher latitudes, glaciers began to melt at a pace not seen in thousands of years. Vast quantities of water, once locked away in ice, began to flow into rivers, lakes, and oceans. Sea levels rose. Coastlines crept inward. Low-lying lands flooded. The Great Bering Land Bridge, once a frozen corridor of migration between Asia and North America, vanished beneath the rising Pacific. Islands were born. Continents were reshaped. But the melting wasn't gentle. It was violent in places. Glacial lakes, held back by ice dams, burst in catastrophic floods.
One such lake, Lake Agassiz, larger than all of the Great Lakes combined, released torrents of water into the ocean. These outbursts altered ocean currents, disrupted climate patterns, and may have triggered brief returns to glacial conditions, like the Younger Dryas, a sudden cooling period that lasted for over 1,000 years. The Earth, it seemed, was not finished with its icy moods, but overall, the warming continued. Forests returned, creeping northward as the ice retreated. Tundras gave way to meadows, meadows to woodlands. The Mammoth steppe, the once vast grassland ecosystem, began to shrink, and with it, many of the Ice Age's great beasts began to vanish. The warming Earth was both a promise and a threat. For animals that had evolved to thrive in cold, open environments, the change was devastating. Woolly mammoths, saber-toothed cats, giant sloths, and other megafauna found their habitats shrinking. Their food sources dwindled. Inbreeding and isolation made populations fragile. Many could not adapt fast enough to survive. But for humans, the change was opportunity. With milder climates came longer growing seasons, new hunting grounds, and more predictable environments. Human populations began to rise. Groups that had once moved constantly began to settle, at least for part of the year. They built more permanent shelters, experimented with storing food, and began to manipulate their surroundings in new ways. The transition was slow. Thousands of years passed, but it marked the dawn of what would become agriculture, cities, and civilization itself. Meanwhile, Earth's climate continued to evolve. Glaciers still existed, but they were shadows of their former selves. Some persisted in high mountains, others lingered near the poles. The vast continental ice sheets, were mostly gone, their retreat leaving behind new lakes, river systems, and plains rich with glacial till. And though the glaciers had carved, scraped, and flattened the earth, they had also nourished it. Their meltwaters deposited minerals, fed aquifers, and shaped ecosystems that we rely on to this day. Many of the world's most fertile agricultural zones, like the American Midwest or the European plains, owe their richness to glacial activity. The paths of major rivers, the locations of great cities, even the contours of our coasts, all bear the fingerprints of ice. And yet, even as the world warmed, the memory of the Ice Age remained etched in stone and soil, in deep valleys, in erratic boulders, in the lines of old moraines. The story of glaciers endures, in genetic markers in our DNA. The memory of cold adaptation survives, and in ancient stories passed down through generations of floods, winters, migrations. Echoes of this frozen era continue to resonate. The Ice Age didn't just shape the Earth, it shaped
us. As the Ice Age drew to its close, the world warmed. But it did not grow quieter. In fact, this period witnessed one of the most dramatic and puzzling events in Earth's recent history: the extinction of the megafauna. Across every continent except Antarctica, large animals, many of them dominant species for millennia, vanished in a geological blink. Mammoths, mastodons, woolly rhinos, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, short-faced bears, and towering birds like the moa all disappeared between roughly 15,000 and 10,000 years ago. The question is, why? Scientists have debated this for decades, and the answer likely lies not in one cause, but in a deadly convergence of forces. First and foremost was climate change. As the glaciers receded and the climate warmed, ecosystems transformed. Grasslands gave way to forests, water sources shifted, plants that cold-adapted herbivores depended on began to disappear. For massive animals that required vast ranges and abundant food, this alone was a devastating blow. Their specialized bodies, perfect for surviving glacial conditions, became a disadvantage in a changing world. But many species had survived previous interglacial periods. This warming, while significant, wasn't entirely unprecedented. So what was different this time? The arrival and expansion of humans. As Homo sapiens spread across the globe, we brought with us new technologies, hunting strategies, and a unique ability to work cooperatively in large groups. Unlike predators before us, We could plan, coordinate, and adapt rapidly. We didn't just hunt the weak or sick, we hunted efficiently, often targeting the healthiest animals to ensure maximum reward. This combination of skill and strategy was unmatched in the animal kingdom. In areas like North America and Australia, the timing is particularly striking. Large-scale extinctions of megafauna occurred within a few centuries of human arrival. In North America, nearly 35 genera of large animals vanished around the time humans crossed the Bering Land Bridge. In Australia, animals like the Diprotodon, essentially a car-sized wombat, disappeared soon after humans first arrived. This leads many scientists to support the overkill hypothesis, the idea that human hunting rapidly pushed large species toward extinction, not always by direct overhunting, but by removing key reproductive members of already vulnerable populations. Small losses snowballed, and over time, ecosystems collapsed. Other factors likely played a role as well. Fires, often used by humans to manage landscapes, could have changed vegetation patterns. The spread of diseases introduced by new species or carried unknowingly by humans and their animals might have devastated populations already weakened by stress. And so, one by one, the giants fell. The mammoths, once kings of the steppe, dwindled to isolated populations. Some survived longer than others. Small groups lived on Wrangel Island in the Arctic Ocean until around 4,000 years ago. But even these remnants eventually disappeared. The saber-toothed cats vanished, leaving behind their fossilized bones and empty lairs. The giant ground sloths, some of which had walked the forests of South America and the deserts of the American Southwest, disappeared so thoroughly that their existence was long forgotten until bones were discovered in deep caves, perfectly preserved. Even animals that didn't entirely vanish, like the American bison, saw their ranges contract dramatically. The ecology of the world had changed forever, but not all of the Ice Age giants are lost to memory. They live on in our stories, in artifacts, and in the DNA of modern animals. The elephants of Africa and Asia are close relatives of the mammoth. The pronghorn antelope still outruns predators that no longer exist, like the American cheetah. Some scientists even believe that modern humans carry in their bones and instincts the ancient fears of large predators, shadows of beasts long extinct. And then there is the new chapter of the story, resurrection. In recent years, advances in genetic science have led to serious discussions about reviving extinct Ice Age species, especially the woolly mammoth. Using preserved DNA from frozen specimens and gene editing techniques, researchers hope to bring back mammoth-like creatures that could one day roam the tundra once more. The goals are not just scientific curiosity. Some hope these creatures could help restore ancient ecosystems, trampling forests into grasslands, spreading nutrients, and helping to maintain the cold, open landscapes that once covered the north. Whether or not such projects succeed, they speak to something profound in us, the sense that we have lost something irreplaceable and the desire to bring it back. But even without revival, the legacies of the Ice Age remain all around us, in the contours of the land shaped by glaciers, in the bones beneath our feet, buried in caves and frozen soils, in our myths and symbols, dragons, giants, monsters of the deep. Many of these may trace their origins to real creatures once seen by early humans, passed down through story and memory. The Ice Age is not some distant, disconnected time. It is a mirror showing us who we were and hinting at what we've become. And in the silence left by the last of the great beasts, the earth held its breath, waiting for something new to emerge. Though the Ice Age has long since ended, its impact is not a relic of the past. It is written into the earth itself, etched into landscapes, embedded in the ecosystems, and carried in the very blood of humanity. Its fingerprints are everywhere. Look at a map. The shape of continents, the paths of rivers, the placement of lakes and mountain passes. Many of these features were directly molded by the glacial forces of the Pleistocene. The vast, flat plains of North America, scraped clean by the Laurentide ice sheet. The Great Lakes, gouged out by the slow crawl of glaciers, filled by meltwater when the ice receded. The fjords of Norway and the rugged coastlines of Alaska, carved by ice, their steep walls the work of millennia. Even soil, something we often take for granted, was reborn by the Ice Age. As glaciers ground over rock, they left behind a rich sediment known as glacial till. This became the foundation for some of the most fertile farmland in the world. The wheat fields of the American Midwest and the breadbasket regions of Europe owe their abundance to this ancient churn of ice and stone. But the legacy of the Ice Age isn't just physical, it's ecological. After the glaciers retreated, new ecosystems took root. Boreal forests expanded across Canada, Scandinavia, and Russia. Temperate forests re-established themselves in Europe and Asia. In South America, the rebounding climate gave rise to diverse rainforest ecosystems. Species migrated, evolved, and adapted to the newly available niches. Many of today's animals bear evolutionary adaptations developed during the cold epochs. Arctic foxes, caribou, snow leopards, and polar bears, all are children of the Ice Age. So too are migratory birds, whose seasonal rhythms trace ancient paths shaped by glacial advances and retreats. And what of us? Humans, the Ice Age shaped not only where we lived, but how we thought, how we connected, how we survived. The deep cooperation required to endure glacial winters laid the groundwork for complex societies. The need to store food, remember hunting grounds, and navigate changing landscapes led to the development of language, culture, and eventually written memory. Even mythology reflects Ice Age origins. Consider the near universal presence of flood myths, stories of rising waters that swallowed the land. These are found in cultures across the globe, from Mesopotamia to the Americas, from China to Polynesia. Could these be cultural echoes of real sea level rise events at the end of the Ice Age, when coastlines were swallowed and once inhabited lands were lost? Or the ancient reverence for mountains, for caves, for the stars that move in the sky? These too may have been shaped by a world in flux. A world where survival depended on knowing the land, predicting the seasons, reading the sky. Our sense of time, the division into days, seasons, years, may have its roots in Ice Age necessity. To miss the migration of a herd or the thaw of a river was to risk starvation. The earliest human calendars, carved into bone
or stone, mark moon cycles and solstices, cosmic patterns tracked by people whose lives depended on such knowledge. The Ice Age also shaped our stories. The image of the long journey, the harsh trial, the cold mountain pass, the fire in the darkness. These narrative archetypes are found across cultures. They are more than metaphors. They are memories. Memories of times when life was pared down to its essentials: warmth, shelter, food, kinship. And though the glaciers have mostly gone, the cycles continue. We live in what is technically an interglacial period, known as the Holocene. The Ice Age has not fully ended, it has simply paused. Based on natural patterns, another glaciation could be expected in tens of thousands of years. But now, something unprecedented is occurring. We have changed the pattern. Through the burning of fossil fuels, deforestation, and industrialization, humans have begun to influence the climate. The very balance of carbon, once regulated by oceans and volcanoes and long-term cycles, is now being altered by us. As temperatures rise, we are entering a new era, not just climatically, but geologically. Some scientists suggest we have left the Holocene and entered the Anthropocene, an epoch defined by human impact. The irony is stark. For millennia, humans survived by adapting to nature's power. Now, we hold a power once reserved for ice sheets and orbital cycles. We can change the world, but do we understand what we are changing? To study the Ice Age is to study ourselves. It's a lesson in humility and endurance, in cause and effect, in the beauty and brutality of nature. It reminds us how fragile balance can be, and how even giants, be they mammoths or glaciers, can disappear. And it shows us that the line between past and present is not so clear, for the Ice Age is still with us, under our feet, in our genes, and in the rhythms of the planet that continue to beat, slow and deep. When the last great ice sheets melted away, the earth exhaled, the winds grew softer, the seasons gentler, valleys once crushed by glacial times filled with rivers and forests, plains once trampled by mammoth herds grew quiet, replaced by fields of wild flowers and the gentle grazing of smaller animals. The Ice Age had ended, but in its place, it left something just as powerful as glaciers or megafauna. It left memory in ancient mines and bones, in stone tools buried beneath layers of loess, in stories told beside campfires, and eventually in the myths and written histories of emerging civilizations. Humans stepped into this new world with new eyes. Having survived the darkest winters imaginable, they were no longer just animals on the hunt. They were storytellers, planners, thinkers. They began to shape the land in ways more deliberate than fire and stone. They
planted seeds, they built villages, they watched the stars not only for survival, but for wonder. Civilization began not because of the end of hardship, but because of the lessons learned through it. In the Fertile Crescent, in China, in the Americas, people began to farm, to gather in larger numbers, to trade, to build. They carried with them the instincts honed during glacial hunts and permafrost nights. They still moved in groups, told stories, followed the cycles of the moon. But the world was changing again. Rain fell more predictably. Forests reclaimed old glacial frontiers, and humans no longer had to fear being prey. The megafauna were gone. The saber-tooth was no more. The woolly rhino had disappeared. Mammoths, once sculpted into cave walls, now lived only in memory. Yet something curious happened. We did not forget them. In our myths, the Ice Age beasts transformed into dragons, giants, spirits of the earth. Bones found in cliffsides were explained as the remains of monsters or gods. In some cultures, the mastodon's skull was believed to belong to one-eyed cyclopes. In others, mammoth bones were revered as relics of an ancient lost time, and in truth, they are. Even now, permafrost in Siberia yields frozen carcasses of mammoths, preserved with fur, flesh, and even stomach contents. These are not fossils, they are time capsules, a bridge across tens of thousands of years, a message in ice. We were here. The Ice Age teaches us that change is constant, that nothing, no matter how immense, is permanent. Not the glaciers, not the beasts, not even us. But it also teaches us something deeper, that life is resilient, that beauty can exist in the harshest of places, that fire and love and memory can thrive even in a world of snow and silence. And now, here we are, modern people living in cities and surrounded by machines, still watching